the opportunities for dramatically improving not only how our projects perform, but how much fun we have with them, because a lot of projects are virtually devoid of fun. But the sense of being able to actually work together with a bunch of like-minded people to create a really superior project and delight both ourselves and the quality of work we're doing and our customers, it's all right there in front of us. And we need to be absolutely focused on making this industry as completely wonderful as it can be. It's already doing, we build fantastic stuff, and we could do it with much less grief and much less waste at much lower cost and higher profit to the participants. All of that is within our grasp. It's the biggest industry in the world. So you could say it's the biggest industry in the universe. And there's just unlimited value that we can bring by transforming this industry.
Welcome to the EBFC Show, the easier, better for construction podcast. I'm your host, Felipe Engineer-Manriquez. This show is all about the business of construction.
Today's show is also sponsored by the Lean Construction Institute. LCI is working to lead the building industry in transforming its practices and culture. Its vision is to create a healthy and thriving industry that delivers outstanding project outcomes every time for everyone. Check the show notes for more information. Now, to the show.
Welcome to the show, Vic Ortiz. Vic, your full description and bio is going to be in the show notes below, ladies and gentlemen. This is Vic's second time on the show, and you're in for a treat. We're going to get started right away with it. So, Vic, you can go ahead and skip the pleasantries. They're hooked already. Go ahead and share your screen. So for those of you listening to the podcast audio only, come back and look at the YouTube to see all the visuals that Vic is going to share. This is the result of frustration over decades of different types of things that Vic has heard. And this is his alleged, and air quotes, brainstorm list of just short things that you need to know. When in reality, people, this is decades of misunderstandings.
My misunderstandings?
And we want to bring those to light.
Yeah.
Let's bring those to light. So go ahead, Vic. Kick us on our conversation here.
So I'm going to share just a couple of slides, and then most of this will be, Felipe, you and I will be talking about this stuff. I have the list I'm about to share on another computer so we can refer to it rather than keeping it up for everybody. I think that might be better. But again, what I was thinking about was, what is it that people seem to either misunderstand or not understand at all about Last Planner that leads us to getting far less than the potential results from the Last Planner system. And so here's what I came up with. There are two slides here. I broke it into three sections. One is, what do people need to know about history and intent? I mean, where did this stuff come from, and what are we trying to do with Last Planner anyway? I mean, if you're really doing it, what are we trying to do? And under that are a whole bunch of foundational concepts that you need to grasp. I'm sure many people listening who've done Last Planner will say, oh yeah, I know that, and that's good. I hope you feel reinforced. But there may be other things that you'll say, wow, didn't know that, or I thought I knew that, but maybe I don't. And the challenge here that I'm offering is for you to have a good list of fundamental things that you ought to be able to talk about ad hoc with some sense of clarity and authority if you're running Last Planner, so you can explain to people why it is that we're doing all this stuff that we're doing with Last Planner. And if you're not at the point where you can do that, then you know that there is room for growth for you professionally. So
congratulations. And Vic, I'll say, I'm going to be in that list too. As Vic sent this to me in preparation for the show, I looked at this list, and there's definitely some areas where I'm like, ooh, I need to learn more about that. So ladies and gentlemen, even this old teacher of Last Planner and implementer still has things to learn and grow. And Vic, you and I both get really good results with Last Planner. Both of us have talked about this ad nauseum. We're still learning and growing. We're not done. We're nowhere near done. We have lots to learn. Go ahead, Vic.
Absolutely. And I'm working on this based on mentorship from great thinkers, including obviously Greg Howell and Glenn Ballard for many years, and people like Todd Zabel and James Chu over at SPS, and then the many practitioners, certainly the folks at vPlanner, Samer Emdenat, great thinkers on all of this stuff. So this is not original for me. This is what I've gleaned over many years. And some of those more expert people than I'm sure could both add and maybe correct something I'm going to say. So everybody, this is my best take on these concepts. So just to continue here, so I looked at history and intent, LPS foundations, and then I grouped some additional fundamental concepts. So this is like 22, but many of these are kind of compound of various issues. The first one up here is really, let's start with it, with kind of the big picture. So we're doing last planner, or people are saying you should do last planner. It's fundamental. That's lean. You can't be lean if you're not doing last planner. So my question to you would be, what problem are we trying to solve with last planner? Last planner, like so much of what we teach in lean, is a tool, a practice. And if you read books on lean construction from LCI, we have, I don't know, 40, 50 tools with LPS and 5S and on and on and on. What's the problem that we're trying to solve with all of this, right? Felipe, would you have a off the top of your head idea?
Yeah, I do. So a lot of people will point and I teach all of the LCI courses. So I've got the teacher's edition on this, Vic, because to teach it, you have to really learn it at a higher level.
Yeah.
And some people are obsessed with the problem of productivity and production. And this is just one, this is my part A answer. I've got a part B. But my part A answer is that the way that we build projects is exactly the same speed and reliability as was done by our great grandfathers and grandmothers in the 1960s. You look at what the US government publishes in terms of labor and throughput, we are exactly the same as we were. It's like we're frozen in time. And at the same time period from the 1960s to now, we're in 2023, you see other industries like manufacturing and agriculture in particular have exponential increases in throughput, like just crazy. And we've had the same technology as those industries, but we've had just a lockdown on the productivity and throughput. Now, my part B answer to that, and Vic is showing that chart on the screen here. So if you're watching or if you're listening, you can see the chart with agriculture and non-farm business. And you can see that's it's like a Pac-Man opening his mouth, where you got some productivity shooting off into the stratosphere. And then construction over the last 5 years is actually even worse than it was in the 1960s. It's even slowed down. Now, what I would say, Vic, as a systems thinker or a systems nerd, the real problem is that we've had increases in complexity and we haven't had systems in construction to keep up with complexity and information exchange like the other industries have. And just the very nature of construction being a remote, even if you're in a major city, it's a first time putting together of a team of people that have typically never worked together. And you don't take time to think about what systems do we need so we can communicate information, get people on the same page, work together towards a common goal, which everyone listening is like, Felipe, those things are so basic. And I can't tell you how many construction projects I go to where people can't answer the question, what are we building? And what does this building solve in terms of problems for the client?
Yeah.
Almost no one can answer those questions outside of highly collaborative integrated projects, Vic. So that's my part A, part B. So it's productivity is low, which a lot of people don't care about. It's not something that motivates project people so much. It's more of like a portfolio level, or just if you're responsible for profit and loss, you care about productivity, but everyday project people, that doesn't turn the lever for them. Not
Not really on the radar screen.
Not on the radar.
what I think the point that I'd like to make here, just get us off with something, it may be controversial right in the beginning, is that if you look at this slide, and it's a slide of descriptors of where our productivity is relative to other industries, and it's making some statements about costs are high, injuries are high, traditional planning isn't providing enough prediction of what's going to happen. Reliability is low in terms of being able to produce. And we do have some evidence that people who do lean do better, and we have a comparison to other industries where other industries have over time reduced the amount of waste, and we have a massive amount of waste. So I would say the thing that all of these have in common, here's the classic 54% of what gets put on a weekly work plan gets done, and it ranges from 40 to 60 generally. But if you had 40 to 60% of the cars rolling off an assembly line had quality problems, were over cost, or were not done on time and were holding up the line, nobody would think that was adequate performance. And we come up with this description that I'll come back to a little bit later. But my assertion here would be that all of that are symptoms. All of that's symptoms. It's not really the problem. And so when we think about what runs programs and what our thinking is about projects in particular, Greg Howell was a co-author of a paper a long time ago. And for people who don't know, there are at LCI a whole series of original white papers. And one of them had to do with the fact that there was no theory of projects for the industry, that we had no real theory of how projects were run. And what Greg, and I think it was Lori Koskela, did is looked at the PMI manual and at PMI certification and so on, and realized that our concepts and our whole, there was no real philosophy behind it. The PMI was just a whole jumble of practices, and those practices had to do with what we call project controls. It wasn't really a theory of what made a project flow or what you were even trying to do.
And for people listening, I just want to interrupt for a second. PMI stands for Project Management Institute because it's not well known.
Right.
It came out of Georgetown in the 1970s, and I'm a project management professional trained. I sat for a test. There are multiple different parts. And as you're talking, Vic, it resonates with me that PMI is a series of project controls, things put together to control a project, but you are dead on. It is lacking the theory of why we have projects.
Right. So I'd say thanks, not me, but Greg Howell and Lori Koskela, the writers, they were dead on. And when you think about it, PMI is Project Management Institute, and you think about the certification that you have now, and that many people have, is as a project manager. And the focus is on projects. I actually had my last time that I was doing coaching on integrated project delivery, I had one of the construction managers tell me when we were talking about thinking of their project in terms of being a production system, she said, well, this isn't a production system, this is a project. So the problem, I think, if we take it down a level, that causes all of this is that we think of project management as what runs our projects. And all that does is give there's like 3 or 4 basic project control mechanisms. There's a schedule, there's the budget, there's contracts, and there's various forms of hierarchical management. And the hierarchical management is really diverse because there's the owner's hierarchical management, there's the project hierarchical management, and then there's this whole plethora of all of the organizations that are involved that have their own hierarchical management, which are not really answerable to each other except through the contract, and there's many ways around contracts. So you have a system that's focused on trying to control the project, but none of that we wouldn't have all of these problems with 80% of projects running over budget and behind schedule and having quality problems if we had a working system of running projects. So the number one thing that I would point out here, the problem that we're trying to solve, is that we have misconceived the whole construction project purpose for being and way that it's structured. And I'm sure a lot of people would go, oh, come on, we succeed in building all kinds of amazing buildings and roads and infrastructure. And, obviously it works. Well, it works at the level we've just been saying. It has all these symptoms of not working as well as it could. The place to start, and this is huge, is that we have to think of the project as a production system. And in order to do that, you have to understand systems and systems theory. Now, the nice thing about thinking about the project as an ad hoc production system, as if you're setting up an enterprise to create whatever it is you're building, and that enterprise is in the business of producing whatever built environment or built system that you're wanting to do. When we start thinking about designing a production system, you now can begin to apply all that is known about operations theory and whole systems thinking and production management from all the other fields in the world that are going on that have been looking at production management, and we can apply that to construction. But you have to adopt the idea that the problems we have are because the way the system we have set up works, it has too many limitations. It has too many faults. And we need to be thinking about production system design, not simply project management. Project management is fine, the little stuff on the top. The heart of the matter is production system design. So that's what we're missing. And the last planner system was really developed by trying to get at the idea of why is it, if we've got project controls, and if project controls in the PMI model, project management is our system for controlling projects, why are we failing so miserably? And the answer is that the PMI tools are simply inadequate to help explain how production happens in the project environment and to supply information and guidelines for how to set up projects. So that's the first thing. Now, that leads sort of to the second question of the project as a production system. People say, yeah, but construction is different. I mean, automobile industries and computers and so on have assembly lines that are running the same projects through or products through the same process over and over again. They can do it. Every project is unique and different. That's a nice myth, but it's false. There are differences in project-based production systems than in factory-based production systems, no doubt. But the basic principles of understanding flow, what contributes to throughput, what's waste, and so on, those concepts apply no matter what we're building. And for somebody who says, well, it's a project, not a production system, I would say, does that mean you don't produce anything? Right? So it's a project, but what do you produce? Well, let's start with concept development. What we're producing early on is an understanding and a description. So we're producing basically what gets documented, but also a shared knowledge base in the participants of what the heck the purpose of this thing we're going to build is, whether it's a pipeline or a building or a hospital or whatever it is, and how does it need to perform. That's a production process. We're producing a set of agreements, understandings, and descriptions, and specifications and conditions of satisfaction. And then once we've got that, if we start looking at an execution strategy, we're now producing a whole bunch of theories about how we're going to manage this project to create the greatest possible value. And then we get into design. And of course, we're producing designs and concepts and options. And we're producing knowledge about the efficacy of those things. All of those are production systems. Anything that produces anything is created by a production system. So the theory of how to make production systems work should be pervasive, and it's virtually absent in the way we do things. We have a bunch of tasks, and something of a schedule, but we don't really understand that all the work we're doing is being done in streams of work, and those streams of work can be made to flow and can be made to be pulled and can be improved and can be studied and can be measured.
Yeah, and I just want to pause for a second as you're talking about this. There was some years ago, Vic, we were doing a presentation to a general contractor, and we said the way that we plan and execute work is a production system. And an executive put his hand up and said, no, it's not. And I came back with the same exact things you said. At the end of this contract, when we walk away, did we not create a building that wasn't there before? And the specific portfolio of types of projects, this particular person was primarily in healthcare types of projects. Mm-hmm. And I said, we're either transforming, we're upgrading existing hospitals, or we're creating brand new hospitals or medical office buildings to treat patients. So the output of our production system is a hospital that patients can use for healthcare treatments. Yep. And I said that by definition is a production system. And what it came down to, Vic, is that sometimes when we challenge people's paradigm and we challenge their belief system of what they think, that how they've labeled themselves and what they do, you're going to face resistance. So if you're listening to this episode and you're hearing, Vic say these problems of how we're thinking, it goes back to the theory of what a project is, what it's intended to do. And he's bringing in information that's been out there for probably thousands of years that's just now getting applied by a group of do-gooders, you included, Vic, bringing different ideas to our industry that have not, for many different reasons, penetrated the ethos of how we think about the things that we do. But I am in agreement with you, Vic, that it is a production system. It is a system, even though it's ad hoc and that it's always variable with the teams that come together and change. Right. But if you are listening and you can't get past that, then you will not achieve and realize the benefits that implementing something like lean thinking and last planner system of production controls, the full title of the system. When Vic and I have done this with project teams, we've been able to decrease schedules 20%, 30%, 50%. And we have friends that implement this type of thinking as a production system, and they've decreased project schedules over 80%. So that's more than twice as fast for easy math by just implementing a production system, and where you're really just being intentional about information flows and these work streams that Vic is talking about. So I just wanted to tell you that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, people. It's not a train that's going to crash into you. Right. There's a much easier way to build and organize projects when you think of it, and we're laying down the foundation for the theory. And I know it seems like a heavy lift for you mentally, but what you believe about your project and don't believe is going to limit your ability to make changes on your project. So we just want you to keep an open mind as you're listening to these concepts that Vic is sharing.
We hear all the time that building enclosure is the #1 problem in construction. And when the task of the building enclosure is presented with so much pressure, it's something most of us would want to avoid. Until now, there has never been a course to teach someone how to manage a building enclosure. Building enclosure is a problem for every company, and the solution is often to ask someone within to try to find training or provide training to their teams to avoid these issues. Field Verified's enclosure management course is the answer to that problem. We learned the hard way, we've learned through failure, we've learned from others. This course, our team, will help those people who are assigned to manage the building enclosure be successful the first time so that they're spared some of the suffering and hardships that all of us went through. There's so much opportunity for a high return on investment, not just when an individual attends and all of the skills that they'll achieve, but when a team participates together, they can raise their level of performance by knowing what each other can do, what to expect, and they can raise the level of performance of that company as their careers excel and the company elevates along with them. The training is built on the science of how people learn. We capture all of the components that are necessary to master a skill. There's a hands-on component to the training where we're building a masonry mock-up, a metal panel mock-up, we're doing EFIS, and even installing a window that later you get to test. The hands-on training gives us the opportunity to translate the lines on paper to actual construction in the field. We always laugh because after the training, people come up and say, this isn't just about building enclosure. There's a lot of leadership in here. There are a lot of people skills. That's because those skills are necessary to be successful in building enclosure and in construction. We'd love to see you get started right away. We have lots of options available. They can come to us in person at Field Verified in Phoenix, or we can bring the entire operation to your facility and train up to 25 people at a time. And we've created an online training that's available for people who might not be able to attend in person. Go to the website and contact us. We're going to start by understanding what problems you're currently experiencing and develop a specific program that's right for the needs of your company.
Well, and the different way of thinking, when you start thinking about how a production system, how to make things flow through a production system, the way you interact with your suppliers, your crafts, everything changes, which means that the contracting that you do, the way you manage the relationships, everything changes. And I think the major reluctance that we have is that this is a big change. Other industries, like I worked at Ford as a consultant back in the 80s, where we took 1/3 of the product development process time out of their whole product development cycle. Used to be 6 years, we got it down to 4 in the matter of a year of very highly collaborative business process re-engineering that we did. And a lot of it had to do with exactly the same kinds of changes that we have to do in this industry. At that time, the American auto industry was organized around engineering disciplines, not around vehicle programs, and weren't focused on the product. They were focused on engineering disciplines and the sub-elements of the product. Very Taylorist thinking about, if you break a project down, break skills down, get the best specialists in their own skill set, somehow magically the whole thing will come together. And that's when, Toyota was gaining market share and American auto industry was losing market share back in the 80s. So there are better ways of organizing. They had to break up this focus on engineering disciplines, which we have now on trades, and we have on, HVAC and structural and the different engineering disciplines, which are run by different companies that get subcontracted in, that have their own profit margins, their own incentives for doing things. And we try to somehow bring all of those together. The auto industry realized they needed cross-functional teams. And this is true of many other industries that design products. They needed the multiple people to be actually dedicated to a product development team, to work together to identify conflicts and problems earlier, to identify opportunities, to share what was new in their engineering discipline that could add value to the product that they were working on. And they dramatically sped things up. They dramatically improved quality. They reduced problems. And they started using disciplines like design for manufacturing and assembly, where, again, rules began to be identified and put in place about how to design things so that you could use gravity to help assemble something, so that parts could only mate in a certain way so you could reduce errors in assembly process, and on and on and on. People have been learning tons for decades about this stuff. And our concept is still that this is just a group of people with specialized expertise that we've got to somehow magically bring together. And the way we do that is through contract schedules and budgets.
Yeah, I want to just
and a monthly
just to add into
the meeting,
on that Taylor, you mentioned Taylorism. Frederick Winslow Taylor is credited as being the father of scientific management theory. And that Tayloristic type thinking, which we call it today, like I learned in business school, has limitations. But one of the outcomes of that, and we see this in construction, you've been hitting on it. I want to give an example to bring this to life. When I first started in construction as an intern on my first project, it was a 12-story medical research building. On that project, we were the construction manager at risk. So like a general contractor on that job. We had 17 contracts. 17 subcontracts to build a 12-story medical research building, including a vivarium and an incinerator on the roof and a sophisticated central plant. And all of that was 17 contracts. Fast. And that job was less than $75 million. Fast
Mhm.
forward to today, I was working with the project team recently. The project was only $34 million, 30, so half the size, 2-story building, small footprint, and it had 101 subcontracts.
Yeah.
That specialization, that's that Tayloristic thinking where we learned at some point that specialization of labor, if we get people really specialized, like Vic said, and you get the very best of one specific thing, and we just throw all those people together, it's going to create something better than what we used to have, a more integrated type of approach. I just want to contrast. That's one of the side effects and symptoms that Taylorism has put onto the construction industry that actually hurts us. And
Yep.
we're saying that this last planner system, thinking like a production system, creates more cross functionality, which Vic was just talking about, which allows us to counteract that extreme specialization that we're seeing in the industry now. So I just want to say thank you, Vic. That's your own unique contribution.
Well, the industry grew obviously out of craft. So you think, 600, 700 years ago, if we were building a cathedral over several generations of time, you studied for years and years to become a decent stonemason or a decent carpenter or, whatever the task might have been. And, so we come from a proud tradition of crafts, and that doesn't mean that craft work isn't still really important, but it's not enough to advance the system. Just checking on time a little bit, Felipe, I'm thinking if we get through the history and intent, kind of these big ideas, then we can dive into the nits and gnats of some of the other stuff, maybe in a follow-up conversation. So I'm going to try to let's hit at a couple of these other ideas here. You were mentioning, you and I both have had people just bluntly say, no, construction is not a production system. So that is, as obviously as possible, the problem that we don't think of construction as a production system. And as a result, we can't do systematic thinking. Just recently, there's been a series of discussions on another construction blog, on Lean Construction blog, with people defending P6 and Microsoft Project as, perfectly adequate scheduling. And if only people would do that correctly, if only they would update the P6 schedule more often, that everything would be fine. And last planner really is completely unnecessary. So here's my answer.
I want to second what Vic is saying. So that comment that Vic just shared, and that's recently happened on social media where people have complained, people that are, and just coincidentally, they make their full-time living as a project scheduler in some kind of project controls capacity. The criticism from people that are in that role say, if people would only follow the schedule I made by myself without talking to anybody, everything would be great. If they would just on a Tuesday at 7 a.m., just install that millwork on the 3rd floor in room 305, if they would just do it in the 8 hours that I allocated for them, everything would be great. Why don't they just do that stuff? And those comments fail to ever talk about how do they communicate that information? How do they get it down to the people? What are the prerequisite steps needed so that millwork can even arrive or be ordered or procured? That's totally lacking from the everyday P6 waterfall type of scheduling out there. And I'm okay with, if you disagree with what I'm saying, give me the comment. And I'm telling you right now that what you respond to Vic and I with your comments is going to show us how you think and don't think about these things.
Right.
Vic and I spend just every day, like, Vic, you're my witness. I called you multiple times this year just to talk about scheduling. So like, this is something that we're engaged in all the time. And we think about this in our free time where no one's paying us. We still think about it and we're working on it.
Yeah, this is actually fun. So, but that's my personality type. I like figuring stuff out.
Yeah, so we welcome your comments and feedback. But what Vic is saying is that there is a growing group of people in construction that say if you would just follow the schedule, everything would be great.
And that was, of course, the first argument we heard. So let's make another really critical distinction here between scheduling and production management and pull planning. Scheduling is putting tasks on a calendar. And there are a whole lot of purported last planner softwares out there where the practice is trades come in with the schedules that they've developed by themselves, probably looking at the master schedule, so I got a general idea. But mostly they've pulled together a bunch of people and resources that they've got to keep busy, and so they try to come up with a schedule of what they're going to do that will optimize their resources and allow them to bill as much as possible and get as much work done. And people come together and throw that either on a paper board or in a computer screen without necessarily defining what the dependencies are, how big the tasks are, and so on. And we'll go into more detail on that later. But that's scheduling. That's not pull planning. Pull planning starts with a milestone and working backwards and trying to balance the resources and the amount of work and the sequence of work and so on to create a smooth flow of work that will accomplish the milestone either exactly on target or maybe a little bit before. What we try to do is have absolutely no float at all in trying to get to the milestone and see how much time the best possible scenario would be when you do a reverse pull plan, and try to optimize that.
So I got to stop you right there, Vic. So Vic just introduced this concept of a reverse pull plan, starting with the end in mind. Exactly what we learned from Stephen Covey all those years ago when he published the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Stephen said in that book, these ideas are not new. They're not my ideas. I'm just putting them together. Reverse phase pull planning is probably the number one thing I never see with teams that allege to be using last planner system.
Yeah.
I would say, show me the evidence of this. And I want to give a shout out to a carpenter. His name is Rob. Rob said this the best to me like a decade ago. He said, Felipe, so many general contractors tell me how to do my work, how many people I should have doing it, when exactly I should be doing it. And they never spend a second telling me what needs to be done. And so I think if we would slow down and tell people, what is that milestone? What is that end goal that we're targeting to achieve? If you would spend a minute telling people what that is, you'd be amazed at what people like Rob can do to get you there. So if you're listening and you've never been part of a real pull plan, which we call, the technical phrasing is reverse phase pull plan, reverse phase planning, then you're missing out on the magic. That magic alone, and that doesn't take that long. I've been on huge jobs, Vic, where it's been billion-dollar size, and introducing that concept of loan has reduced schedule time and increased collaboration in a matter of half an hour to an hour. And we're talking about $1 billion worth of scope. It is not, it sounds scarier than it actually is to do it. And if you're out there and you're thinking you're losing control by doing something like that, you still start with defining what it is that we're contracted to do in an incremental piece, so we can reduce batch size, improve communication, collaboration, reliability, so many good side effects. So if you don't know what we're talking about, that could be something, write that down, things that you need to look further into, get curious about that. Definitely hit Vic up, hit me up. We're happy to share examples. There's so many published examples on this. Don't just Google or Bing search or DuckDuckGo. Talk to somebody with real practical experience in this area and learn more.
Amen. So I think the thing I really want to challenge people on is that a schedule is not a production management system. Schedules don't manage production. They lay out an idealized picture of what one or more person thinks should happen, but they don't actually manage production. And a corollary to that is that the more, if you say things like, well, this talks about what needs to be done, but it doesn't necessarily do resource loading. And so the P6 people would say, well, we do resource loading P6 plans all the time, master schedules and so on. That's the assumptions that go into creating such a master schedule are based on what the current practice, best practice is in the industry. And the current best practice, as we've already established, isn't very good. Most projects come in late and over budget, and only half of what is put on the weekly work plan actually can get done. So if that worked, if that scheduling worked, we wouldn't have those results. And secondly, that scheduling is based on standard practice, which is full of all of that waste and trouble and so on. So if we're laying out a bar of work in an area for a period of time, it's based on assumptions that the work is going to be done in this incredibly inefficient way that it's currently being done. And we still can't meet the construction schedule. So for all of you who are using software to do pole planning that doesn't require that you size the amount of work, and we'll talk more about Greg Howell's rules for proper task design here and definition. But if you have a software that doesn't require you to link a predecessor task end finish time to the start of the immediate successor time, and if you don't have those tightly coupled and the dependencies clearly defined, you have not done a pole plan and you have not done flow. All you've done is thrown tasks on a calendar. That's a schedule. That's not a pole plan. So that's important to know. So the last thing, I guess, in terms of wanting to hit a core concept is this idea of the difference between what is particularly lean. This would be a larger topic, but what is particularly lean, what makes something lean versus just makes it a good management practice. Because lean is a distinct thing. And I'm going to just go down here. This is the standard LCI slide. And I think they've taken what Likert called the 5 fundamentals of lean per se, and they've modified it a bit, and you'll see that there a lot of overlap, but they put respect for people at the center of this. And to me, this is a little bit of a nebulous concept. I mean, my life's work has been helping people become better, more collaborative leaders and treat each other well and use human resources better. So I'm a big advocate of respect for people, but I would note that respect is a feeling, and that what we're really talking about is organizing a production system in a way that actually is fun to work in and uses everybody's resources and skill and knowledge and so on. And that what we want to have is behaviors that embody and are built on respect. But if you have respect for a whole bunch of people who don't know a better way of working, the best result that you can possibly get is the sum of all of their knowledge. And if some of their knowledge is tradition construction, you get a pretty nice feeling group of people working together, but they're working in a crappy system. And W. Edwards Deming, one of the fathers of total quality management back in the 40s and 50s, and father of statistical process control and professor at MIT, would say that no person, no matter how good and brilliant they are, can perform better than the limits of the system in which they are working allow. So respect for people can only go so far. And then we have these other elements around the edges here of optimizing the whole, generating value, eliminating waste, continuous improvement, that get more at what you're trying to do with the people, what the focus is. To me, the key thing here is that lean is an operations strategy. And unless you're thinking of a production system and looking at the work as a production system, then you can't say that you can't really get down to what's in the system. And in the system are operations, the subsystems and operations and tasks and so on. So applying an operation strategy when you don't have a production systems perspective doesn't get you very far. It's just kind of confusing. And you end up doing a little bunch of micro process improvements, but your big system doesn't really change. So on this idea of respect for people and last planner, just kind of looking at these as two poles, what we have is in the world of DBIA, the Design Build Institute and Design Build Industry, which is a whole lot of public works contracts, as most of everybody probably knows very well. One of the best practices has been called partnering. And partnering got real popular back in the 1990s. Greg Howell and I used to facilitate partnering events on some pretty big projects and a few not so big. The idea was that the way we get around all of this fractionation of all the different disciplines that Felipe was talking about is to get people together and talk about how they're going to work together, how they want to treat each other, and create a partnering charter or a partnering agreement that talks about how we're going to treat each other, and actually put that respect for people into a more concrete form. And that was great. It is what I would call the social part of the project, and the technical part of the project was not really dealt with. People would get together. If you had a really good partnering organization, at least every month or two, they would get together and update the partnering. And it was a chance for all of the people who were stakeholders in the project to say, what's working, what's not working, what should we try to improve over the next period of time. The worst partnering, of course, just was a single event. They'd come up with a document and tack that on the wall somewhere and ignore it.
Or put it in a closet and never look at it again.
Yep.
Forget those.
Yep. So, but the good ones really take the partnering seriously and put energy into building the relationships. The question is, if you build the relationships and nobody knows a better way to work than the traditional way of work, what you're going to do is do a better job of implementing a lousy system. So that is not good enough. So DBIA and partnering is a great concept. And what Glenn and Greg did by going out and developing Last Planner was go to the exact opposite end. They went down to the work face and said, what is the ability of the people to actually perform the work that they've committed to doing? And what stops that? And what about the way the system is set up keeps us from being able to get better than 54% plan completion from week to week? And what we really need is those two to be coming together. We need the social part and the networking and the teamwork and taking the relationships of people in the project team to heart. And many people are doing that. There are a lot of good practices with lunches and get-togethers and team building and other things. So that's all very positive, and that has to be informed by really good technical knowledge about operations management. So we need a bottoms-up and top-down kind of approach, and both of those need really high-quality leadership that really knows what they're doing, which is why you and I are having this conversation today.
With all of you. So Vic and I want to share. Vic, you can go ahead and stop the screen share for now. We're going to close it out. We'll edit the stopping of the share out. So the purpose of this series of Last Planner conversations that we're having on the show is to help people understand some of the things that Vic and I have gone through in our journey and still going through. We're not done. We're not done yet. We're still learning. We want to share some of that with you so that you can come with us on this journey to having a both social part and a technical part combined together. And a lot of people are starting to realize that this is a leadership thing. And if you are listening to this show, congratulations. You have the opportunity to be such a leader with technical and social prowess so that you can implement this on your project. We just hope that you enjoyed some of this background, and then come back as this continued series goes on to go further into some of these areas that Vic, air quotes, brainstormed, but are really his major issues that we've been seeing over decades of implementation with the system. I want to thank you, Vic, for coming on the show and being so kind as to share this background with people. What do you want to leave people hopeful with as we continue the series?
Well, the opportunities for dramatically improving not only how our projects perform, but how much fun we have with them, because a lot of projects are virtually devoid of fun. But the sense of being able to actually work together with a bunch of like-minded people to create a really superior project and delight both ourselves in the quality of work we're doing and our customers, it's all right there in front of us. And we need to be absolutely focused on making this industry as completely wonderful as it can be. It's already doing, we build fantastic stuff, and we could do it with much less grief and much less waste at much lower cost and higher profit to the participants. All of that is within our grasp. It's the biggest industry in the world. So you could say it's the biggest industry in the universe. And there's just unlimited value that we can bring by transforming this industry.
Very special thanks to my guest. I'm Felipe Engineer-Manriquez. The EBFC show is created by Felipe and produced by a passion to build easier and better. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. Let's go build.